Welcome everybody. We're back here with Paulien, and we have a new person here at the table. I guess I should introduce myself. I've been in that for a little bit. I'm Pastor David Hamstra from the Evidence Central Seventh Adventist Church, and here we have Pastor Cholo Sabatella. Did I get it right?
That's right. That's close enough.
Close enough. Sabatella?
Yes.
Yeah, from our church in Montesquieu. Maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what you do there.
That's right. So I am the pastor for the Montesquieu. I like calling us a church family. And I'm also a chaplain at Mamawe Atascatan Native School.
Amen. Mm-hmm. Well, we got a lot of people responding in the comments to your message tonight, John. It's really great. It was very quiet in the studio tonight. We were listening intently, and it's something that I think is going to be a very timely message for many of us. Well, we got some interesting sound coming into our studio here, and our tech just left. Hopefully that will be dealt with. Okay, moving right along. Main takeaways from the message. I guess I'll get started. I mean, I think the core of your message was one illustration of how the remnant message of Revelation can be a unifying factor among different religions, and you especially focused on the Abrahamic religions that divided out within let's say the first 5 centuries AD, more or less, and how the Seventh-day Adventist remnant message can sort of bring those back together in a way that I think many would find compelling. I don't think we have time now to go into all the details you just covered, but Pastor Sholo, maybe you want to highlight something there or bring out a different thought?
Yes. What I really liked about this message, I think I've seen it gotten some ideas on YouTube because I love your understanding of Revelation. So what I like most is that it's challenging us as Adventists or as believers to think outside box, to see how we are related to other people as all of us as children of God. So I truly appreciated that.
Well, and then I want to ask you in return, since you have been working with Native Americans, I was raising the possibility that God has designed the remnant message in such a way as it can connect with all the different, people groups and religion groups, etc. In your experience with Native Canadians, does this ring true there, or is there very little in common between Adventists and Natives?
Yes, there is. There's a lot. We believe in, all of us believe in God as our creator, God as our healer, and the health message that we have. So those are two main connections that we have as Adventists with indigenous communities.
And this is a testimony I'm hearing around the world that when Adventists embrace the spirit and the principle of the remnant faith, some of the details sometimes get lost in the shuffle, but when the principle is embraced, it always finds connection with people. For example, in New Zealand, there's a native people called the Maoris, and they have a Sabbath tradition of all things, just in their culture. It's not a Christian culture, but there's a Sabbath tradition and several other things that only Adventists among Christians actually connect with them. So Adventists have a way of reaching Maoris, for example, that no other group in New Zealand does quite the same. So I've had that experience here and there around the world, and it just suggests to me that this remnant message is not just connecting us with Jews and Muslims, but is actually can connect us in more powerful ways around the world.
I had a similar experience too in the broader scholarly community. There was an Adventist history conference I went to where there was a Jewish scholar presenting on Sabbath-keeping movements in Africa, and that there are many peoples in Africa who see an affinity between their traditional customs and those of the Old Testament, and are even to the place where they will think that they are long-lost tribes of the Jews. And whether this is in fact the case or not was not of interest to this particular scholar, but simply the fact that there's this affinity there, and he's documenting this around the world. And I thought of a family friend who is from the northern part of India and the area around Nepal, who confided in me a similar suspicion. Many of the purity rituals that they observe are very close to the Old Testament. He wonders if there's any historical connection between his people and the Jews. And I put him in touch with this scholar, and the scholar told me Yeah, this is very interesting because now I am researching India as well and finding many of these connections in India. So when the Seventh-day Adventists came to the community in northern India, Nepal area where this person is from, they were very receptive to our church's message. Yeah, I think there's much work to be done in this field.
Well, bringing full circle back to the first night, the sense that often we're losing connection with our young people.
Yes.
I think this understanding can restore a lot of that, because there are aspects of Adventism that maybe the younger generation in North America doesn't connect with. But when they realize that God has placed those things there to connect with other people, they're very solid on diversity, for example, and being fair and respectful to all different cultures, and the realization that Adventism may be, as much as any other opportunity, a chance to connect with all kinds of different people, I think would be very attractive to the younger generation in North America.
Yeah, it is a challenge because I was thinking as you were presenting that many people of my generation, this is the part of Seventh-day Adventism that they would struggle the most with, right? Why should I, observe these abstinences from various things that other people seem to get along quite fine with? But we're seeing in the Bible that there's some indication we shouldn't be doing it. But how does this make sense? I think that's one way of approaching it. The other thing I'm seeing among young people of current generations is that they are in fact looking for rituals, things that they can observe in their life that connect them to higher meaning, and maybe looking closer to home might be a place to start for such people. Sholo, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the fact that I don't know, because I look at religion, our church today, I don't think we're only just losing young people, but I think we're losing almost everybody, including the adults, right? It's just that most of the time we think that it's the youth, the emphasis has been on youth, but if you look, especially with all the COVID challenges and the change that's been taking place, it seems to me that we have lost the essence of how to relate our message with other people, right? So we've been just feeding ourselves, and that eventually becomes irrelevant, just like the Dead Sea, right? So I think bringing this aspect, it brings us back to the main reason why God has called the remnant to be in this place. So I truly appreciated that.
So if we want to forge ahead,
Yeah.
if we want to reach the place that God has envisioned for us, we need to reconnect with the past, reconnect with the remnant message, but to see it in the way that Muslims see it,
Yes.
in the way that some of the native Canadians might see it, the way maybe the Maoris see it. It is as we frame what we have learned from Scripture in a new context, it often becomes more meaningful to us as well.
Yes.
I've learned amazing things about Adventism from interacting with non-Christians, because when I see what they care about and so on, and then I say, no, wait a minute, we have resources that can be helpful here.
Yes.
But maybe like judgment is maybe an area we don't emphasize much anymore. Who wants to, be sitting in front of the judgment these days? You see, but when you realize that maybe the majority of people on earth feel that the judgment is an exciting thing to look forward to, because if you've ever experienced injustice, what do you need? You need a judgment.
That's right.
You need somebody to set things right. While we've kind of shied away from that in the West in recent times, I think if God put it there, it's going to be found worthwhile.
So this is a direction I wanted to try to take this, and then I think we should probably get to some YouTube comments at some point here. But when we talk about all these connections that we have to other groups, and how we really have a beautiful symmetry to our message that branches out in all these directions. And I think this goes along very well with what Ellen White says about not carrying the objectionable features of our faith at the front when we're dealing with people, right? Work with them where we have that common ground.
Yeah.
But then how do we take the next step in bringing someone closer toward the remnant trajectory that we see ourselves as being on, where they might have to give up some features of their current religious practice or beliefs? For example, I think we can do a lot with the Quran when working with Muslims, but they have a whole other tradition that they reckon with as well, that carries some things that are not so amenable to Seventh-day Adventism. So what do you have to say about that next step in bridging those gaps?
Yeah. Well, using Islam as an example, the Quran has proven to be quite an ambiguous book in many ways. In fact, in the third surah, the third main chapter, there's even a statement of the ambiguity in this message.
Yeah.
And it's a deliberate ambiguity. And so Muslims have always argued as to how do you make sense of the ambiguity? How do you find the straight path?
Right.
And so they go to things like, well, it must be the companions of Muhammad after he died. They're the ones that best understood us. We go with that.
Yes.
Others have said the hadith,
The
the
reported
traditions.
sayings.
Yeah, that's where you go to make sense of the Quran. Others have said the scholars, the Middle Ages, the Wahhabis have their own way of reading it. So
Yes.
you have these different traditions. The Quran itself says, like we saw tonight, if you're confused about what this is all about, talk to those who had the book before you.
Right.
Wow.
Go explore the Old and the New Testament. That's where it'll come together. And I have found that when Muslims compare the Quran with the Old and New Testaments, the Quran becomes a different book. And it's a valid Islamic book still because it's the core document.
Right.
And it's being read in the light of its own principles of interpretation.
Right.
And so that insight has proven powerfully impactful among many Muslim groups. So I would simply say, if you want to make connections, let's say you stumble into a Zoroastrian tomorrow.
Yes. I have,
Okay.
by the way, met a Zoroastrian.
Yeah.
Believe it or
All
not.
right. You stumble into a Zoroastrian. You don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, ask a bunch of questions. Let them define their faith for you.
Yeah.
And then go on the internet and find out more, etc. And then keep the conversation rolling. As you get to know where that faith is coming from, you will probably find some of these connections that we saw with Islam and with Judaism also in these other faiths. And with Zoroastrianism, that's also an eschatological religion with a cosmic conflict kind of an approach. So there's things there that we can talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, asking questions. And the beautiful thing about this generation is questions, you often ask dumb questions or offensive questions, but if you're honest and sincere and you're somebody that they like, they'll usually be quite forgiving, and that's how you learn.
That's right.
You just engage with people and learn how to talk to them.
Cool. Well, we have a Sandra Willing who, by the way, hi Sandra, it's good to see you here. Sandra was a former church member of mine way up in Peace River. She says she hasn't had enough time to get her comments typed in yet, so she's bringing in this one early. She says she was wondering about references to something big is coming, but she says tonight what you tied it together really all made sense for her, and it opened up her mind to a new avenue of studying and thinking, and she thanks you very much. Wanda Johnson, again, hi Wanda. Wanda was my counselor at Berman University. I don't know if she's still there, but she says she's been blessed by this. She had a Muslim say to her that Allah tells us to worship only one God, but you worship the Father, Jesus, and Holy Spirit. Therefore, this Muslim person told her that she is wrong. How would you respond to that?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned briefly coming through tonight, you don't lead with the objectionable portions of your faith, and that's one way that Muslims will try to get the argument flowing and so forth.
Yes.
You're not going to change anybody's mind with discussion, with argument.
Right.
So what I did is always try to steer the discussion in a more spiritual tone.
Right.
And one way to do that is to say, that's an interesting question, but that's kind of intellectual. Can we talk about prayer?
Right.
Something that's really practical, really meaningful, and maybe we can find some common ground,
Right.
And if a person simply wants to argue, then that's not a relationship probably that's going to go anywhere. I remember once I was invited by a group with both Adventists and Muslims in it. It was in Europe, actually. And they wanted me to just talk about, what are the positives between Adventists and Muslims? What can we learn from each other? Was the topic. And the party was crashed by a well-known Islamic apologist who just tore into me and just laid out all the things that are wrong with Christianity, all the things about the Bible that he thinks are suspicious, etc.
Sure.
And I just sort of went silent. I was not going to respond to that in kind. And finally, in the end, some of the Muslims says, well, we came to hear the professor talk, so what do you say to
Right.
all of this? And I said, well, I find this conversation not heading in a valuable direction because we came together to learn from each other, and what we're doing is pushing each other away. When the meeting was over, they banned the guy and said that this is not the direction we want to go. We want to learn from each other. So I think the spirit in which you respond, if you truly love people the way Jesus said to love them, they will sense that. They will sense this is not a game. This is not a, we want to win over you. We want to gotcha kind of a thing. This is not what this is about. This is about God, and it's about relationship. And when all of that is happening, it can change the dynamic.
Beautiful. Yeah, I always say whenever you argue with somebody, you give them a chance to reinforce their opinion to themselves.
Yeah.
And so it does not very fruitful. But I suppose at some point you would need to address that, the Quran's critique of the Trinity has some challenges and issues that we would say it's off base in that. But that would have to come much later, I think, in a process, right?
And as a starting point, we both acknowledge that Jesus was from God. In fact, Muslims even consider Jesus the perfect prophet.
Right. Yes.
So we have a good solid starting point right there.
Yeah.
And I think that over time, as people sense a deeper and deeper spiritual need, their picture of God will grow.
Yeah.
And their picture of Jesus will grow if Jesus is the one that is ministering to those needs.
Amen.
Yeah. This isn't something that happens overnight.
But
with the right spirit and friendship, God can do amazing things.
Yeah. Yeah. New experience prepares the way for a new answer. Cholo, anything else you wanted to throw in here? We have, I will say, about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, we'll keep you a little longer tonight.
Yes, so one of the questions that I have, I've heard you talk about I don't know if you were ready to go into this, but the visible remnant in some of the videos. So how do you see these three monotheistic religions today? Do you see them as the visible remnant, all the three of them, or you see part of them as being the invisible remnant?
Well, the eschatological remnant is what God is going to do with every nation, tribe, language, people, and I believe religion.
Right.
That's right.
And if that is the case, the scenario I see in Revelation is that you have all these institutions of religion in the world, each of them founded to honor something they felt that God wanted them to do. So if we believe in a great controversy, then that means that God is at work in every religion and Satan's at work in every religion, just as God and Satan are at work in each of our hearts. If that is the case, then I think, I'm afraid I'm losing my train of thought. Where did we start with this?
I think the question had to do with the visible remnant. When does that sort of appear, I guess?
Yeah. Okay, yes. So the institutions of religion in the world, according to the scenario of Revelation as I understand it, Babylon will be the institutions of religion coming together for wealth and power,
Right.
and seeking to dominate. And the call, come out of her, my people, will be not just to one or two religions, as maybe we've sometimes thought in the past, will be to every religion.
Yes.
I remember that When we were having a dialogue with leaders of the Lutheran Church, there was a German scholar that broke down basically and cried. He says, "You're telling me that I'm okay, because I follow Jesus, but my grandchildren will be lost because they won't become Adventists." And he says, "To me, this is despicable," etc. And after a lot of back and forth on that, what I said was, "Look, you worried about your grandchildren. I worry about my children."
Right.
I says, what Adventists believe is when the time comes, we're all going to have to face that decision for ourselves.
Yeah.
And at that time, our religious background is not what's going to matter. What matters is if we're answering to what God is doing right now.
Yeah.
And so what I would understand the eschatological remnant is kindred spirits from every religion, from every national background, finding each other and saying we have more in common with each other than we do with our own homes of religion. And I've seen that happening in a number of places around the world where I feel a deep kinship with people that I would never have imagined that could happen. But we have a common hunger for God.
That's right.
And a common desire to get closer and closer to God, and can help each other along that way. And in the end, these kindred spirits, they may stay where they are for now, but in the end they will find each other. And that, I think, is the eschatological remnant. And I pray and believe that the Seventh-day Adventist institution will play a major role in that.
Right.
It's not guaranteed, remember?
Yes.
The
It's not
temple, the temple. Right.
There will be a thread between the historical remnant and the eschatological remnant. How thick that thread is up to us. If we embrace the message and the mission that God placed among the remnant, God can use us to do those things we saw in Isaiah. Those amazing stories there. If we choose to focus more on our little party, etc., God may use somebody else. And I'm concerned about that. I genuinely believe that we as an institution have the potential to be the catalyst for this great eschatological remnant. But the future is not yet written, and how God is going to do it is not yet written.
Oh, that's beautiful. We're at 9 o'clock, so I think we should wrap up. However, there is one question, which is, are your materials available at the ABC? How can people get the Revelation series on CDs? I'm imagining you don't run our ABC, so you wouldn't know the answer to that question. But I would want to think that after you have presented all these things, our ABC would be carrying your materials and send them on our bookmobile truck throughout the provinces, and you'd be able to pick it up there by God's grace.
Well, I did see this afternoon that at the camp right now are many copies of the video series that was referenced, and also a number of copies of 2 of my books on Revelation. And so people who are interested in that may want to hurry over tomorrow and take a look at those and then see if that's something you'd like to invest in.
Fantastic. And as I mentioned, check your local listings for when the bookmobile will be in or near your community. I would imagine those things should be on the truck as well very shortly, if not already. Well, with that, John, we just want to thank you so much for coming up here to Alberta. I hope you got to see a few of the sites while you were here. And by God's grace, you'll have a safe travels home and many more years of fruitful service in His name.
This has been a blessed experience for us. It's been a very precious camp meeting, and I'm grateful that we had a chance to be here.
That's awesome.
All right. God bless you all. Good night.
Good night.